Today I chose the Gigue from Partita number 3 by Johann Sebastian Bach. I'll start with historical context. This partita was written in Latin, like most of Bach's instrumental works. His father taught him the violin, which was Bach's first instrument. Bach's job before Cotton was in Weimar. He worked there as a concertmaster, a job mainly involving the violin playing. He was leading the whole orchestra, composing for it, and playing the first violin part. And in those days, there were no conductors, so Bach was doing the job of a conductor. And this is how Bach gained so much experience as a violinist. Also, he had more freedom experimenting composing in Cotton than in Weimar or Leipzig, since in Cotton he worked for a prince instead of a church or a school. For example, in Leipzig he worked for St. Thomas School, where his schedule was very tight, and still, without any from his own initiative, he managed to compose two massive works, the Mass in B minor and St. Matthew Passion. And in Cotton, he worked for a prince who was very supportive and appreciative, and Bach had more personal relationships with him. The prince even became the godfather of one of Bach's children. And imagine what Bach could have done in Cotton. So many masterworks. Now I'll tell you what is a partita. A partita is a set of dances, mostly a keyboard work. It was originated from earlier Baroque times. Some movements of a partita are Gigue, Allemande, Currente Bourrée, Sarabande, and Gigue. Some partitas have preludes, but although they're more of introduction pieces, and dancers don't dance to it. For example, in Partita in E major, there is an opening preludio. Bach was one of the first to ever write for solo violin. And before Bach, partitas were played to accompany dancers. And already towards Bach's times, it was more of a performance piece, and the main focus was on the musician. Now, I'll tell you about Bach's composition style and values. Obviously, Bach would write in Baroque style. Bach would use the limits of the instrument, and he'd expand the capabilities. He'd always think of a bigger instrument when composing. For example, Partita in A minor or solo flute. It's very much like a violin piece and has some violin-specific qualities that stretch the capabilities of the flute. For example, large intervals, constant motion, which makes difficulty breathing, and one last high note, which is a very high on a Baroque flute and still very challenging on a modern flute. Same thing goes for the violin music, which uses the violin's capabilities to the maximum and could be played on a harpsichord. In fact, whenever Bach did them as performance pieces, he would play these solo violin sonatas and partitas as keyboard works, since they were very much like keyboard pieces, and he was good at improvisation, so he was able to improvise a bass line or other voice on the go. Finally, I'll make a small analysis of the Gigue from Partita number 3. A Gigue is a light and lively dance, usually in compound time, for example 6/8, that often has a contrapuntal texture when it's a keyboard work. In this Gigue, Bach uses dynamics for contrast between repeated measures, and he does that explicitly. Since it's in E major, the upper tonic is on an open E string, and that's what makes it sound so bright. Most of the time, it's in a major key. The lack of dramatic parts makes it unusually happy and unique among the other pieces of the cycle. This movement melodically and rhythmically resembles a fast concerto or cantata movement. However, the solo violin harmonically fills in for a whole concerto or cantata ensemble. And this is how Bach, with his ingenuity and will to discover and improve, gave us not only some of the most beautiful violin works, but also became arguably the greatest composers of all time.